Hey guys, Artosis here. Today I'm going to be going over the current units in Battle Aces, the new RTS coming out from the Uncapped Games. This is their website. You can check this out. I believe it's playbattleaces.com, and you can also sign up for the beta there as well. Yeah, playbattleaces.com. This is the /units one, and this is it currently shows all the different units that they have. Now, I've played the game quite a bit, and I've played with and against all of these units, so I'm just going to give you my impressions of them. It might help you to get jump-started with the way you want to play. So first off, if you look at these core units, you're going to notice that they're well, you might not notice right away, but they're basically grouped together. Okay, the units kind of go together with a similar theme, right? Like, here's the Recall. Here's the Recall Hunter. The Recall is a ground unit that shoots ground, and this is like an anti-air ground unit, okay? All the tier 1 ones are ground units, but as you can see, every other one here is an anti-air, and the anti-air units simply don't fight as well on the ground, right? They counter air very hard, but they're very weak compared to the ground units. So let's jump in. First up is the Crab. This is by far the worst unit in the game. This is like the newbie starter unit. As you can see, it's got a lot of health. It acts like it has speed. It really, it gets out microed by absolutely everything. Really just a starter unit. If you're looking to play competitive ladder, you will never run into this. Okay. The Hunter, I've seen it just a little tiny bit, but it just seems to be not a very flavorful anti-air. It doesn't seem to do anything better than the other ones. And I think it is paired with that Crab reasonably well as a unit that probably you won't end up using. Okay, the Recall. These guys recall on a pretty quick countdown to whatever base they're at, right? So these are actually very, very strong, I think. Maybe a little bit more difficult to use than some of the other units because they aren't super microable. It's more about, I think, the tactics with this one, but definitely one that I've seen a lot and is a good choice if you want to be able to very quickly jump to a base to defend it. Very similarly, the Recall Hunter, right? If you're going Recall, you'll almost always go Recall Hunter with that. Of course, you don't have to pair these with their similar types of units, but the strategy can work well, right? Like you can roam about with the Recalls and the Recall Hunters and then just jump home suddenly if you need to. Then we have the Blink. This is the most microable unit currently. This is like a big choice by a lot of very strong players. It also scales into the late game better than all the other tier 1 units. So this is something as you get into the late game, you are going to basically get a lot of the red resource that you have to dump into something because things just kind of cost more of the blue resource later, at least in the games that I have been playing. And so the Blink is a great choice because of that. Looking at the Blink Hunter, definitely one of the best anti-airs in my opinion. Even if you're not using the Blink, this is a great way to have a lot of mobility with your anti-air and to get underneath those air units really, really quickly with that Blink ability. Then we have the Gunbot, which comes with the Overcharge, which is basically 3 stims, and those do replenish over time, but you can't just spam them out or you will end up being without them for a very long time. Really good damage output overall. Definitely a very strong choice, I think, as one of the stronger tier 1 units. Definitely seen that a lot. The Missile Bot kind of goes along with it. It has that same type of overcharge as well. So if you like that type of mechanic, a good choice for the anti-air. And then we get to my favorite unit, my most used unit here, which is going to be the Wasp. The Wasp, it's kind of like Zerglings or something like that. This is the fastest of the tier 1 units, and the weakest, the cheapest. It's just super, super, super fast and very good at like surrounding things and being swarmy. One thing I can absolutely mention is that as games, if you're getting into games that are tending towards the later game, and then you start dumping a lot of your extra money into these, it does not scale as well as something like the Blink or even the Gunbot. You know, as your opponent gets a lot of splash damage out, these things just evaporate, but absolutely awesome in the early game. And then we're going to jump over to the Hornet here, which is actually something that matches the speed of the Wasp. Okay, and you can kind of see how these are named, right? But this is actually, out of all the anti-air, this is my personal favorite. It is very, very fast. And while I said before that you basically don't want the anti-air units to fight against ground units. I feel like this is the best at fighting against ground units because it's so fast. You can do a lot of kiting. And in fact, it pairs really well with the Wasp, as the Wasp is a melee unit, and then this is keeping up with it in speed, which very few units can do, and will have that ranged attack. In fact, I found this unit key in when, I'm actually very much a Wasp user, and I found this unit really key in holding certain types of rushes so that, the Wasps might not gain the right surface area, and then you have this added in there. So you can see a little bit of my bias going towards the Wasp and the Hornet. All right, so that is the tier 1. Let's jump up to the Foundry units. The Ballista. Now, the Ballista does really good damage, and as you can see, there's it's kind of ridiculous the damage it can do here. You can see how quickly the Wasps get cleared. This was not very popular in games that I played. I didn't end up using it much. My opponents didn't end up using it much. I don't have like a very strong opinion on that one. It feels like there's other better choices for splash damage, and we'll show you those as we get to them. Here is the Crusader. This is, I believe, the highest health unit currently released. It is only a single shot that it hits. It looks like something that might deal splash damage, but no. It just comes up and kind of punches things. It kind of reminds me of like the what is it called? The steam tank in Warcraft 3. Obviously, this can hit anything, but it's really, really, really tanky, super high health. You'll be really surprised how long it takes to kill one of those. This is the Bomber. It is a Baneling. It is really, really, really strong because people tend to, I think, especially at lower levels, you can see, right, the amount of splash damage it's dealing. People tend to clump units up a lot, when you have those all-army hotkeys and stuff. So this can be really strong. If your opponent is going for bombers, it's one of the more important things to really pay attention to. When I look at the information bar, like that is one of the main things I'm looking for. Are they going to get up to bombers quickly? Because they can just wipe out a big chunk of your army very quickly with that. So definitely very important. Also to mention, you might have been looking at the prices. Most of the tier 2s are 125, 125. The Bomber is obviously much cheaper there, but it does die as soon as you use it. So just something to take into consideration. Okay, up next is the Shocker. This one's pretty popular. It's got some good splash damage as well as reasonable health. Definitely saw this utilized quite a bit. It's kind of like, I guess, more of a mid-range. It's a good choice, I think, for splash. I felt when playing against and playing with it, the Shocker was a bit better than the Ballista. So make of that what you will. That was my kind of feeling on it. Then we have the Recall Shocker. The Recall Shocker, I didn't get to see used like a huge amount. It's just, it kind of goes with the Recall guys. It's very, very slow, but it does have that splash damage, right? So something like this can be very useful. For instance, if you have something that's massing up and swarming onto your base, any one of your resource bases, to recall some of these guys in, they can clear them. Like, let's say mass wasps are trying to kill a base, and you send a few of these guys in, they're going to clear them really, really fast. This is the Mortar. This is one of the more interesting units, I think, in the game, and I saw so many players trying to make this work, and I've tried to make this work a lot as well, right? So the Mortar sets up. It does not attack while it's walking around. You have to set it up, and it's basically like siege mode, like a siege tank. It's got insane range, like really, really good range, really, really good damage, but obviously very immobile. So that's kind of the thing that you have to think about. One of the nice things about it is, let's say you want to use the all-army hotkey a lot. If this is sieged, it won't come with you on that all-army hotkey grab, right? So just something to mention in there. All right, this is the Destroyer. This is a very teched out unit. As you're going to be able to see here, it does single target damage that's very, very high. So basically, the Destroyer is an anti-high health unit. So, like, for instance, the Destroyer can absolutely demolish most of the other tier 2 and tier 3 units, but it does really poorly, for instance, against all the tier 1 units. Okay, so it's a really interesting mix-in. The Destroyer I mostly saw utilized and mostly utilized myself when you chose 2 tier 2 foundry units. One as your kind of unit that's going to power up your whole army, and then the destroyer as the unit to kind of support that and snipe off your opponent's good tier 2 units. All right, jumping over to Starforge, we have the Butterfly. The Butterfly, this only hits ground units, but does insane damage. Like flying 4 of these, for instance, that you see here, through a base will kill off all the workers in a matter of seconds. One of the higher damage outputs towards ground as far as flying units go. Definitely a very popular unit that I've seen a lot. Then we have the Dragonfly. The Dragonfly is a bit quicker than the Butterfly, does a little bit less damage to ground units, but also can hit air units. So it can be a really interesting choice, right? You might look and say, well, why wouldn't I use that over the Butterfly? Well, the Butterfly deals damage to that ground a lot quicker, right? The Dragonfly is going to take longer to deal that damage, but yeah, it can be utilized as an anti-air. And you can get into funny situations where, like, let's say your opponent is going Butterflies, but you're going Dragonflies. Well, you're going to do better with that because your Dragonflies can take out their Butterflies, right? So definitely a lot of thought has to be put into, if you want one of those units, which one it's going to be, because they do overlap some, but obviously with very different strengths. All right, then we have the Falcon. The Falcon just does really good damage against ground and is quite tanky. It's one of the better air units that for fighting against anti-air, basically. It was pretty semi-popular, I would say, playing against it. I personally didn't care for it as much, but yeah, it does have that high tanky health, so will stay in the battle a little bit longer. Maybe a little bit better at sniping really important units like the Mortar in a battle than something like the Butterfly, which is going to die quicker, even if it deals more damage. Then we have the Airship. The Airship was probably my least used unit overall. But yeah, it's just kind of like a good balance of health and damage, and it hits both the air and the ground. So think of it like Dragonfly, but less speed with the higher damage and higher health, right? Like it's very similar to Dragonfly in that way, but like the slower, tankier version. All right, then we have Advanced Recall. So right now what we're doing is looking at some units for Starforge that are... here, I'll scroll over so you can see it a little bit better. Sorry. So Starforge, I mentioned this in a previous video, is not just flying units. Right now, those are the flying units. Those first 4 I showed you are the flying units that... And they kind of mirror each other, right? Butterfly is the really high damage but kind of low health. This is kind of the... I also hit air, also do good damage, but, not as much. A little bit faster. And then you have, the Airship, which is going to be more tanky, but hits both. And then the Falcon, which is kind of more like the Butterfly, right? It's going to be more tanky, not as much damage, right? So you have those two in kind of pairs here. Now, going into this, a very popular strategy that I've seen so far and that I've enjoyed is having one flying unit in your Starforge tech and one ground unit. So even if you go towards that flying unit tech with Starforge, you also have some other options. Now, looking at Advanced Recall, this guy's interesting because, again, most of the units in Starforge and, in the Foundry are like 125, 125. This is 50-50, right? So it's like much lower health, but it actually has really, really good damage output. This was a surprising one. When Recall warps in to kind of save a base, when there were a lot of advanced recalls in there, it was very surprising at how quickly they could kill things off. So definitely really high damage, but a little bit of a glass cannon. This is the Stinger. This is one of the faster units, and as you can see, it's just kiting those poor crabs I told you that basically are the worst unit in the game. But yeah, the Stinger does really good damage and has really good speed. They are a little bit fragile. This is one of those units, again, that you might want if you want a much faster army for maneuvering as opposed to just being able to stand its ground and fight. And then we have Heavy Turret, which plays way differently than like everything else in this game so far. The Heavy Turret doesn't come out of your main core. You actually drop the Heavy Turret anywhere you want near your bases. So you can't just drop them at your enemy's bases, your opponent's bases. It is, as it says, versatile base defense. Well, kind of, because when you drop it, that's where it lives. It doesn't ever get up. So you can do things like be across the map and then be like, oh gosh, they're attacking my 5th base. And then you just drop a bunch of these for defense of that, and they hit both air and ground. It didn't, to me, feel like they were super strong at anything. I can see here they're giving you a pretty high damage. It didn't feel like they had super high damage or super high health, even though I guess the stats are towards there. But yeah, definitely something if you want to play a more turtle defensive game or have like a fallback defense very quickly at a base, these could be very useful for you. And I kind of like as well the fact that these cost more of the red resource than the blue resource, I guess matter and energy we're calling them, because that is going to help you to suck up those resources later game. All right, Advanced Foundry. So this is like the tier 3 units we're getting into now. Heavy Ballista. Didn't actually get to see this one used too much. Did use it myself a little bit. But obviously, as you can see, this is like the next level up from that other unit that we were looking at. Like, I think it was just called the Ballista. See, the Ballista there. You can see that a lot of these are kind of like in families in a way, right? Kind of similar looking and similar function. Heavy Ballista, obviously very, very strong, but it wasn't the most popular thing I feel like up there. And then there's the Predator. This is one of the best anti-airs in the game, is my feeling. Like very, very, very strong as an anti-air, where it's got really good range overall. Oh yeah, it shows that here as well, and can just evaporate masses of units in the sky, and it does have splash damage, so definitely a very good choice, but you know, obviously being tier 3 going to take a bit to get to. And then we go over to Advanced Starforge, and okay, so we have the Bulwark. This was one I definitely did not see get utilized very much. I tried to use it a little bit in like more turtley strategies, but haven't seen it like really pay off in any great ways. I'm not sure what the spot for this is going to be. As you can see, very high health, very high damage, not super fast though, right? And it has to get right into the battle. Then we have the Cat Bus. This is definitely, yeah, I would say the most popular tier 3 unit that I've seen played against and played with. The Cat Bus destroys. You better have better than tier 1. Like if you have tier 1 as your only anti-air, this will destroy you. This does not hit air units, but the Cat Bus absolutely cleans up units on the ground. Very, very strong stuff. You know, I definitely suggest that people try out the Cat Bus. You'll like it. It's really, really cool. And just, it feels like a finishing endgame unit. You get a bunch of Cat Buses, and you're going to walk through a lot of ground armies. Or fly through, I guess. And then we have the Locust. The Locust is the cheapest tier 3 unit that I've seen so far. You can see at 50-50. By the time you get to tier 3, sometimes you'll have a bunch of bases and be able to pump out 1 million of these guys. They hit air, they hit ground, they're super fast, but obviously very light as far as health goes. So they definitely can be taken out. But what I've liked about these is you can swarm them so quickly, and they're super, super fast as well. So definitely, for me personally, my favorite tier 3 unit thus far. And then last, but not least, is the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie is just kind of, it feels like it's really only for anti-air. Didn't really get to utilize it against ground units, but I did try this out quite a bit against those other large flying units. As you can see, taking on the Bulwark here, for the cost, it absolutely can beat those down. So a pretty good solid anti-air. You know, you might want something like this, for instance, if you're hitting a lot of Cat Buses, right? This is going to be able to wipe that out pretty darn quickly. Okay, so yeah, that does it for the units currently shown for Battle Aces. Hope that you have enjoyed and learned something. Let me know which units look most interesting to you. All right, thanks for watching.